it's really awesome in that they're bringing wheelchair users into light. And I think my goal is that I don't want to be seen, but I think that can only happen when we bring wheelchair users into light.
Hello and welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast. This is the best place to find inspiring stories of women and girls across the country who will inspire you, challenge you, and empower you to be the person you were created to be and to change the world through your life. It's your girl Kate here, and I'm excited to share today's One Girl Revolution story with you. But before we get into it, please make sure that you subscribe to the One Girl Revolution podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's another way that you can make sure that you get all of our new documentaries and videos first, and our new podcast episodes emailed to you every week. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and TikTok at One Girl Revo. That's the number One Girl REVO. And please share our content with your family, friends, and followers. I always say that that's a free and easy way to support any organization, and we could really use your support. So please follow and share. You can find out more information about One Girl Revolution, find all of our podcast episodes, donate to our nonprofit organization to help us continue our work, and so much more on our website at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number onegirlrevolution.com. On this week's episode of the One Girl Revolution podcast, I am so excited to welcome Laura Stark. Laura is an all-around incredible woman. She's an athlete, an advocate, and a survivor. Laura sustained a spinal cord injury in the summer of 2016 while she was on a cross-country biking mission with friends. Her friend Anne died from the accident, and Laura had a long road ahead of her. Laura shares the story of her accident. She talks about the incredible mission trip that she, Anne, and others were on in the summer of 2016. Laura talks about how her life changed on that day in the summer of 2016 and how she reclaimed her life and was able to go back the following summer to finish that same cross-country trek. Laura is an athlete and an advocate, and she talks about that in our conversation. Laura also sits on the board of Women's World on Wheels, an incredible organization that raises awareness and addresses the complex challenges that female wheelchair users face. Did you know that of all wheelchair users, women only account for 20%? That means it's mainly men. Women's World on Wheels is building community and creating resources for women in wheelchairs, and they're just doing incredible work. I am so honored and excited to share my conversation with Laura with you. So without further ado, here's Laura. Laura, welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I am really excited to have you on. We got connected through a mutual friend of ours, the power of social media, Sarah, who I went to high school with, and she's been following your story. And I know you have some mutual friends, and she was like, Kate, you need to have Laura on the podcast. So we talked a couple of days ago, and it's just been such an honor to get to know your story and hear about your own journey. And I'm excited to share your story with our listeners. Laura, so before we get into your story, there's so much to talk about, but I know in the world, we oftentimes are defined by what we do, right? Or like what our story is, or, you know, what we look like. People want to put us in boxes, but I'm curious from you, how would you describe yourself? Who are you? And tell me a little bit about your own life and who you are.
Yeah, I agree, and I don't like being in a box, and I think that's part of how I've used, what happened to me to go further, I guess. I now describe myself as an athlete. I wasn't always an athlete. I graduated college in 2013 when I was working as a nursing assistant because I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with my degree. After about a year, I found this nonprofit called Bike and Build, where you would bike across the country, raise money for affordable housing groups, start to build houses and work on housing projects along the way, all while raising awareness for the need for affordable housing in America. So I, quit my jobs, grabbed my savings and joined that group. about 3,000 miles in, my teammate and I were hit by a car. She did not survive, Anne. I did, however, I was left paralyzed from the chest down. And I think since then, I mark everything from before injury to after injury because my world is just wildly different. Um, so I remember when I was injured, I don't remember the first few weeks really, but I learned I was paralyzed, but I wasn't really thinking about what my life would be like. I was in a hospital, I was just trying to learn how to sit up by myself again, learn how to put on my pants. Found out that my arms were really weak. Just very basic everyday things that I had always taken for granted.
I know so much for you changed on that day. And I think all of us can probably relate in different capacities. There are moments in our lives. One of my friends calls it suddenly moments. It's a lot of times what we do in that suddenly moment, right? How we embrace the journey and how we continue to move forward. We can either become the victim to something that happened to us or something that we've experienced, or we can continue moving forward. And you are such a light to so many people through your own life and journey and what you're doing now. I want to rewind. I want to talk about your accident, and I want to talk about what happened since. But when you found Bike and Build, why was that organization important to you, or what made you want to do that project?
So on a base level, I had always talked about I like big things, I am a big idea person. I don't always execute, but I'm always a big dreamer. And I always thought it was cool to just even drive across country or, do just big ideas. And my friend actually did Bike and Build 2015, the year before I did. And at the time, it was a summer my mom passed away from lung cancer. So looking back now, feel I didn't follow her journey as much as I wanted to. I didn't touch base with her, but I try to I don't give myself enough grace a lot of times. And I realized that there was a lot going on. But I remember the next summer she got married and a lot of her Bike and Build friends were at her wedding. 10 of them, they came, they slept on the floor of her parents' house. And I'm like, that's strange. She's like, you wouldn't get it. They're fine. But I met all of them and they were great, awesome people, kind and just fun, very lighthearted, down for anything. And I think in a way that drew me into the culture. I started doing more research, and I was 26 at the time, which was a year too old for Bike and Build, but they raised the age limits that year. And so I signed up and decided to go for it. Love the idea of biking cross country, doing this great feat, but also with a purpose. That's what drew me.
What was that experience like that summer before the accident? What were some of the things that you were able to do or people you were able to help? What do you remember about that?
It was awesome. I still think it's one of my favorite summers. There's just the people I met. My teammate is a team of 26 of us. And Anne, the girl that I was biking with, I met her that first group. She was put in my chore group. And she was just a ball of energy. She named herself Animated Anne. So she was always wacky and fun and just a great personality. And having her in my chore group, she was always down to help, down for anything. It was just, oh, that's just Anne, or, she was just quirky and a good person to be around, and saw the same with a lot of my teammates. Just great people, and then working for a common cause. I think a lot of us weren't cyclists, so it was a lot of learning that first week, learning how to be with a group of people you don't know, learning, how to cycle and be efficient on the road. And we were supported, so a van would take all of our equipment, but we would have to pack everything up make breakfast for everyone, stuff like that. So I think a lot of team building, but then also we would get once a week, we'd stop at a job site to paint or to build garden beds. Sometimes meet with the families that were benefiting from the affordable housing groups. A lot of times Habitat for Humanity was the group we supported because they were a nonprofit that could support a large group of people volunteering at once. We work on the build sites. Sometimes we would advocate and teach bike safety to children or to community. So advocating for affordable housing, but also advocating for bike safety. So it was great. Just all day, you'd have 8 hours to get from one place to the other place. Free. Everyone's like, yeah, I wouldn't be able to do that. Yeah, you would. It's like nothing else to do except bike.
Laura, I once walked across America in college, and it was a similar thing, a mission group. And prior to me walking, all of my friends would joke because they would try to take me to the gym to like, okay, you're going to have to walk like 25 or 30 miles a day. Just start with 1 mile. And the first time I ever did it, Laura, I like laid on the couch, put my feet up. I was like, I'm never going to be able to do this. But It's amazing. Like all you have to do for you, it was like, all you have to do is bike. All you have to do is, for me, it was walking, and you somehow figure it out. And especially when there's that mission driven element, it kind of keeps you going, and I think that's so much of life too. Life can be so difficult and struggles come our way. But when you stay focused on like that we have a purpose, that we have a mission, that we have something to accomplish, even in our own everyday lives, you just live a different way.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. It was a great summer of just biking, building. Yeah. Hanging out with my pals. So
yeah.
Good.
So what do you remember about that day? And maybe you don't remember a lot before the accident happened, but what do you remember about that day? And what do you remember about, or what do you know now? Because I know that obviously there's been some reporting and you've heard more detailed reports about exactly what happened.
Yeah. So I only remember the accident happened at, I think, 6 p.m. And we usually got ready very early in the morning. The night before is, I think, when it started becoming foggy, like my memory now. I remember our route meeting and going over some of the details. Vaguely remember, because we slept in tents that night. We only camped a handful of times on the trip. We usually stayed in like churches or community centers. But it was in Jackson, Wyoming. We tent camped, and it was a really cold night. So I think, some people slept in the van or camped in someone's backyard. So some people slept in the garage. I ended up in the tent, and my shampoo bottle broke open. So I remember vaguely that being a thing. Like it was all over everyone's stuff. My teammates later talked about how they had to wash all my bin. It took forever cycles because there was just so much soap. And that morning, it was just like, I remember it being a fun morning. I rode, don't remember much after that, but I rode the trip with Anne, the girl that was hit, and then Michael. I think he dropped off at maybe our first or second lunch stop. We would have a lunch stop if we rode more than 90 miles, or if we rode more than 90 miles, or if it was more than 90 degrees out, we would have 2 lunch stops. So I think that day was the day we had 2 lunch stops. We were also biking over the Grand Tetons. So there's 2 mountain passes. So in a way, I'm like kind of glad I didn't remember. That was probably a really hard day. I think it was a 90-mile day in Idaho Falls, and we were about 10 miles out from our destination. Ann and I were near the back of the pack, but I think there was 4 people still behind us. We would bike in groups of like 2 to 6, so not all of us were at one place. It was easier for cars to pass us if they needed to. We were biking on like the shoulder of a road, and just a destructive driver. Um, I thank God I don't remember that. Some of my teammates were around, and that was, really hard for them, and they had to drive. Some of them had to drive by, and I can't. I still to this day think they had the worst end of it. I got out easy. I don't remember any of it. Anne's family, my teammates, they had to suffer. My family, they had to suffer a lot more, and that was really hard for me to come to terms with the first few years, and even now around the anniversary, I think about them and their suffering. But and luckily, I don't really remember clearly for the first 2 or 3 weeks in the hospital. I remember little things, and my friends and family will tell me things that I've said or funny things. And even my dad was there one day. He said that him and my sister were talking about, she's paralyzed. What's she gonna do? What about this? What about this? And I just stopped them. And I told them, let's focus on my breathing first. I'm not worried about that. And I just think that's very Laura. I don't worry. My family, they're worriers. And I think that bothers them sometimes, that I'm not really a worrier. I focus on here usually, or the big grand pictures. I don't focus on the in between. And I just remember when I did understand what was going on, I just remember being exhausted, too exhausted to even focus on what was next. My therapist would give me videos like, look at this, what you can do after your injury. I was too tired. I was like, all right, I'll just go take a nap. Very focused on the here and now. Towards the end, I would start worrying about what would be like when I got home, but I don't think I was even prepared how life out of the hospital would be different. Because I knew how to be a wheelchair user in the hospital. Did not know how to be a wheelchair user outside. So that was interesting. And when I was listening to your podcast for the WAGs of SEI, they talk about the transition, and it just struck me. I was like, I completely get it. It's just different.
Yeah, it's so different. And I had shared with you, I love the WAGs of SEI and their story, and I encourage everybody to go check it out. It's episode 72, and I'll put a little link to it in Instagram stories so people can check it out. But my own personal stories, I have a friend from DC, 3 months after his wedding, he was in a swimming accident and ended up in a wheelchair. And so I remember my perspective is obviously very different from yours and from his wife's, and, everybody has these different perspectives, but I just remember how much his life changed, and it's in so many little ways. And sometimes the little ways are more difficult. Like you and I had talked about, even going to restaurants, right? Like sometimes somebody looks it up and they're like, oh, it's ADA compliant, I can go. And then next thing you realize that the bathroom is down a flight of stairs. It's just all of these little things. And we need to be having conversations, because I want people to be aware of all of the intricacies of stories like yours, of all the intricacies of something, okay, ADA compliant, what does that actually mean? And also, it doesn't mean that the culture has their eyes wide open and see all of the things. So what was that experience like for you, going from the hospital, coming home? What were some of the most difficult things? And maybe what were some of the things that surprised you?
Yeah, so I think initially so you don't know what you don't know. And I think that's the hardest part. It's like, you can't study for living with a spinal. I mean, had I been exposed to it previously, I could know what I might need, or, who to talk to. But even my dad, they'd ask him questions when I was in the hospital, and he doesn't know. My mom, she was a nursing assistant before she passed. So I'm like, what? That would have been really helpful about now. My dad was never the caretaker until after my injury. And I think so they would ask him in the hospital, like, can we do this? What do we need? And he didn't know. We got home that very first day, And it was just like almost shell shock. You don't know what to do. I didn't go back to my house. I was living in my grandma's basement, so I couldn't go back to that. So I moved to my dad's house, which is about an hour away from where I was living. And he had bought it over the summer, so he hadn't even lived in this house. So we both came home to this brand new house. Luckily, it was one floor. Our old house was, double floor. So I think God always has a plan for you. We got home and we're like, what now? He went to go shopping, go get groceries. My sister came over to hang out with me, and I was like, I want to sit on the couch. Like, I just want to lay on a couch again. That's all I wanted. Got on the couch, but I couldn't get up. So it was a whole thing. I think I ended up falling on the ground, and I'm like, well, I can't even lay on a couch anymore. I think that was the first. I was like, well, things are different. Even we got home, and I think my hospital bed wasn't there. I didn't have a bedside commode. I didn't have these equipment, and we didn't even know who to contact, what to do about this. I think the care management didn't prepare us. Did I need nursing? Probably. I didn't even know what to do. I didn't know how to do a bathroom program. I couldn't really transfer independently. My dad wasn't able to go into work for a while. I think no one prepared us. And my accident happened in Idaho, so my rehab was in Idaho. So I know there was some disconnect, Idaho to Michigan. It was just, we couldn't set one up and start visiting people, start meeting with people until we came back to Michigan. So it was, the first few months was very, very steep learning curve. I started going to outpatient therapy with U of M, and I think that helped immensely, more mentally than physically. Just getting out, because I was very active. I worked 2 jobs before I went on a bike trip, always hanging out with friends. I never slept. And after the injury, I, had all this time just sitting at home, couldn't drive, couldn't do anything. And I remember when I was at inpatient, one of my PTs, she said, "Oh, support group's happening next week. You should go. The topic is recreation and sports." She's like, "You would love it. It'd be great." In my perspective, I was like, great, I can meet other people with spinal cord injuries. I have lots of questions about like bowel and bathroom programs, things that able-bodied people can teach you, but it's different if you don't have the experience. I go to the support group, and it's all men. We talk about accessible hunting, accessible fishing. Great, but not something I was looking to get out of that. And it was just, I left kind of feeling defeated, just because I look for community. I like to talk things out. I want to talk with other women, and just wasn't there. And I think that was, at that point, I was going to therapies and stuff. I felt medium confident, like just rolling around in my chair. But I was not independent in any regards. And it wasn't really until one of my bike and build friends lived out in Colorado. I think it was her that had saw this camp that was starting with a group of women, wheelchair users. She's like, you should get in contact with them. I signed up for this camp. It was like a year after my injury. Went into it very, very nervous, but came out of it a lot more confident than I had been before that camp. And I think that's what helped turn things around in my recovery a lot of ways.
One Girl Revolution is a nonprofit multimedia platform that is dedicated to highlighting the stories of world-changing women and girls. Help us continue our work empowering women and girls and telling their stories. Donate today at onegirlrevolution.com or on our Facebook page. You brought up a really important statistic to me when we were talking on the phone, just about the statistics of women in wheelchairs is only 20%. And so it's mainly men. So the experience that you had in the support group is just an example of the statistics of women being out there. How did you find community? Was it through this camp? And talk to me about how you continue to build community find resources, find support, find your people. I think that that's so important for all women, that we need to have a community of support system. How did you find that?
Yeah, so I found the camp, and I think probably around that time is when I started rec therapy. And rec therapy, recreational therapy, is when a therapist comes and helps get you back to everyday life. So in the beginning, before I could drive, we would go to like the hair salon, how to navigate a hair salon, how to navigate Applebee's, how to do these things that I was doing before my injury. How can I still do them? And I think at the time I wasn't even sure. I guess I figured, yeah, I could, but could I do anything to the extent at which I did it? I didn't know. But I mean, just in a salon chair getting my hair washed was therapy in itself. And I think I had that rec therapist, Jessica. She would take me to do whatever. For that hour a day, I was back, how I used to be, quote unquote, normal. And I did get involved. I found this camp. I remember texting the director like the weeks leading up. I was like, I don't know. I don't have this equipment. I can't transfer. What if this happens? What if this happens? She's like, Laura, you're in a group of women. It'll be fine. We have this person that can drive you back if something happens. We have this person that can do this. Still nervous. I'd never flown by myself. Even before my injury, I'd never flown by myself. So it was definitely a leap of faith. And I think, yeah, my rec therapist, I looked for resources on like how to board a plane, how to pack. And even those resources they're much easier to find now, even 5 years ago, through social media. But until you experience it, I feel like you don't quite know. So at this camp, I get to this camp there's probably 10 to 15 women in wheelchairs. And I hadn't even really met more than one or two, like never in a group, women in wheelchairs. And I didn't realize how much I was missing or how much I felt out of place until at that camp I didn't feel out of place, which is so bizarre for me to say, but the wheelchair wasn't the thing to talk about. Like, okay, everyone uses the wheelchair next, so like we were more similar than different, where in everyday life, I was wheeling, people would comment or what happened, or, very aware of me being in a wheelchair, where some of my girlfriends, we don't even talk about what happened. It's not a topic that's the first thing that comes to mind. So I think that's really nice. People like, I saw that these women could drive, they could transfer by themselves. They would ski, shoot, play tennis, all these very independent activities that I didn't see. And I remember, why do you still have your tip bars on? I was like, I don't know. I'm just trying to figure things out. Found so many tips and tricks, just how to live life. And I think, and those women, they're still some of my closest friends now. I'll go to Denver and just hang out with all my girlfriends in wheelchairs. And yeah, I think that was definitely the major turning point. After that, I came back. I started cycling again. I started planning to finish my route. I wanted to finish my cross-country ride by the 2-year anniversary. So came back, jumped on my bike, started planning for that trip the next year. And I think that lit a fire, got me started doing things again.
Just having that community and having that support, like you said, where it's not just all about your wheelchair or people that are like overthinking things. It's just like a normal part of your life now, and having people that just see you as Laura and like, let's talk about what's going on in your life. What are your stresses, all the normal stuff that every single person deals with. And we need those support systems, that community, the people, our friends, our sisters. I think about it with regards to women. It's like, these friends that become sisters and just support us. You ended up finishing your route. Tell me about that when you went back. What was that experience like? I'm sure it was a mix of emotions. I'm sure it was very difficult, even just emotionally. And tell me about that.
It was wild. So So we did the route. We rerouted slightly. Didn't really want to go through Idaho where I was hit, not because I was hit, but there was only one road. It just didn't seem safe, especially for hand cycle. I was going to be much lower to the ground. So we went through Montana a little bit more. And like I said, I'm a big picture person. I did a lot of planning, but I think I didn't look. We were biking that first day, and I got a couple of my biking build friends to join me throughout the route. So I was never, one of the girls drove a camper for us. So I bought a camper, had it adapted, and we used that for the whole trip. So one would always drive, someone else would ride. She's like, Laura, how much, what's the longest ride? How much have you been training? On our first ride, it was like 50 miles. And I was like, oh, I've done like 20 miles so far. She's like, Laura, it's like, I don't know. You just got to do it. So and we happened to go over 3 mountain passes those first 3 days. It's like, I just didn't realize. So it was a lot. I didn't realize how type A I was either until after my spinal cord injury, because before I would do everything by myself and not worry about it. Now I have to ask people to do this, do that, and that, and that was hard. I think I've calmed down since then a little bit. I don't know. Don't ask my friends, but so we did that, and even I think we only had 700 miles left after Idaho Falls. We did the final 10 miles into Idaho Falls with the community, and that was really fun. They closed the roads down. We finished at a bike shop, and the town was really supportive, and that was a lot of fun to get to meet a lot of people that I would have met had I finished the ride. And so my bike and build friends came out and drove with me. That part was really therapeutic. Because I had never seen Idaho Falls, and that I hadn't finished that route that day, and I think that really bothered me. From then, we drove to Montana, and about halfway through that, I was back in Idaho Falls, and I ran to a pole and I broke my leg.
Oh, geez.
And I was like, oh, yeah. So I told the doctor, I said, what do you want me to do? He's like, what do you want to do? I said, I want to finish my ride. So he gave me a walking boot. He said, just take 3 days off. I said, okay. So the bike shop in town fixed my bike so my boot would fit in. It was looking back, it was fun. I know it was stressful at times, especially with a spinal cord injury. I'm a complete injury from the chest level down. So I can't feel, they don't have any sensation. So I hit this pole and I was like, I think something hurts, but I don't really know. And so my friend and I were like, okay, let's just finish out the 5 miles of the day. We got back to the campground and I was like, I think there's something wrong. I'm just not sure. And nothing looked wrong, And even when I get to the emergency room and I told them, I said, I ran to a pole. I don't know, but something's wrong. They did full body scans. They're about to let me leave. And I said, are you sure it's not, can we scan my legs? We had x-rayed my legs. And then they did. And they're like, yep, you broke your ankle. But it was so bizarre. It just hurt. I could just tell you something was wrong. And that's also the scary part about spinal cord injury. Sometimes I'll be sitting here. I had pain a couple weeks ago, but I didn't know what it was. So that was my first time I encountered that. But after a few days of rest, we finished off and we hit Cannon Beach on the second 2-year anniversary of my accident. And that also, a lot of my teammates came out for that final ride into the ocean. And that was a lot of fun. That was also very therapeutic. And to finally dip my bike tires in the water.
Your determination and resilience, Laura, is so inspiring. And I hope you know that. And I hope you see that. And I'm just so grateful for you sharing your story. And you have no idea how many people are inspired by you and everything that you're doing and just by your own journey. Because I know it can be so difficult and terrifying, right? To go back and finish the ride where your life changed and you lost your friend. And but that's just so beautiful that you did it and that you truly are a survivor in so many different ways. So since then, you've just become this incredible advocate and voice for so many people, of course, women in wheelchairs. But talk to me about your life now and all the things that you're involved in.
Yeah, so now still I'm way more active than I was even before my injury. I think I had all this opportunity and time. I think God wanted me to slow down a little bit before I was just working myself to death. After this, I was like, oh, there's an opportunity to go skiing, go do tennis, go luging. I just took every opportunity I could because why not? You know, you have such a limited time, just do it. Um, so I really embraced trying things out. Landed on wheelchair basketball a few years ago. In 2018, I went to a drop-in wheelchair basketball clinic with U of M. Found out I loved it. I did not like basketball before. It was boring sport. I was a softball player, but I went to this clinic. I got there like 10 minutes late, so everyone's already playing by the time I got there. And what was wild to me, it ended and half of the people stood up. Most of the people just stood up and walked away, and it blew my mind. I just assumed everyone was wheelchair users, but most of them were able-bodied people. And it was just my first realization that like everyone can play and be on the same playing field finally. So I could play with my friends, and even I would have the advantage because I knew how to use a wheelchair. It was just like a very leveling and it was really cool that I really became a fan of basketball, and I kept pushing the director at that point to start a team. And he's like, give it time, Laura, give it time. And eventually COVID hit and things stalled a little bit, and I had went away from the program, but I finally went back to it, and they said, no, we're starting a team next year. I said, let me in. They did, and we just finished out our second season. It's been phenomenal. I'm in love, and I actually joined a women's team as well in Grand Rapids. And Nationals is next week, so really excited for that.
That's awesome. I hope you guys win.
We'll see. I do too. That'll be great. And I'm working on trying to get a women's team with U of M. But they always tell me, Laura, you just need other women. I'm working on it.
You're working on it. You're fine. You're building community. And like you said, it's a little bit complicated because it's only 20% of women. I want to ask you about, or only 20% of the community is women. I saw this ad recently, and actually I brought it up to you before we were recording. Skims. So Kim Kardashian's underwear and bra company. I follow all of their stuff, and they had an ad recently that I was really inspired by. And they had a woman who was in a wheelchair, and she was wearing like all the Skim stuff. And to me, that representation is so important because when we all need to see people that are like us in ads and advertising and films. And I was talking to somebody recently about the similar thing on the podcast about seeing more people who have Down syndrome or other, diversity in everything from skin color to able-bodied and wheelchairs. What's your perspective on that?
So I think it's really awesome in that they're bringing wheelchair users into light. And I think my goal is that I don't want to be seen, but I think that can only happen when we bring wheelchair users into light. For some reason, that Skims ad caused, so much conversation where it shouldn't have. We should have just already been represented. It should have been a normal thing. And I think, quote unquote, normal thing. And I think that's what's great about bringing wheelchair users into these different campaigns is it raises awareness and maybe causes everyone to see just as another person. I think that's what I want to be. I just want to be just another person who happens to use a wheelchair. And I think children right now are at an advantage because they're being exposed to wheelchair users, to people with Down syndrome, to people with different abilities. And I think they see it as just another person. So I think that's very important, bringing wheelchair users and other people with disabilities into this campaign for that reason. My nieces and nephews, I think they just see me as another aunt, you know. I mean, my wheelchair is cool to them. It's just not weird. And I think that's what's really important.
Normalizing our differences is so important. Mm-hmm. And like you said, I think it's so cool for children to be seeing this too, because, you know, I grew up, and I think you're in a similar time frame of when there wasn't diversity, even in like the Disney princesses, right? Like all of them were blonde haired, blue eyes, all look the same. And it's like, no, we all look different, and our differences should be celebrated and also just normal. It should just be a normal everyday thing. And we shouldn't have to think about it. We shouldn't have to talk about it like the Kim Kardashian, the Skims ad. It was like, why are we talking about this? I think it's actually great. But it became this big news story. And, you know, there were people that were saying that, anyways, we won't get into it. We won't get into it.
But even like, I want clothes that fit me. Like, women will try on clothes, and no one wants to sit down and see what it looks like. But that's my reality. You know, clothes are tighter when I sit, or like shirts ride up, or pants rise down. And I think the Skims campaign creates clothes that is designed for someone who's sitting, or is easier to pull on. You know, it took me so long to figure out how to put on a pair of pants, and when I was in the hospital, because I can't push my feet down, and, you know, I can't lift my butt up to get weight off. And it's just making some of these clothing, like through Skims, it makes it easier for wheelchair users to even wear those clothes. And so we don't want to wear your grandma's like compression garments, you know? So I think that's very awesome.
Yeah. I love all the things that they're doing through Skims. I think it's cool. And I'm happy that they ignited, in some ways, I think it's good. It ignited a conversation. So you and I can even talk about it and say, no, this is a good thing. So you just were added to the board of Women's World on Wheels. I would love to hear about what is Women's World on Wheels, and how did you get connected to them?
Yeah. So Women's World on Wheels, it used to go by Cycle of Hope, but we were working on rebranding and reestablishing right now under new leadership. So it was originally the camp that I went to 5 years ago. It stopped for a few years, and we're starting it back up. We're really trying to empower women wheelchair users and bring this community to light, and give new wheelchair users, or even old wheelchair users, just the opportunity to thrive as they are, and to build community with other women. So that's what I'm doing right now. We're working on doing our first camp in August, starting out small based on a lot of like past participants. But the camp has rock climbing, zip lining. There's a pool. In the past, we've done like tennis or yoga, different activities. We had like a career workshop once, and I thought that was very important. So many people can't go back to the career that they had been before injury, or even up, regardless of if you're injured or if you were born in a wheelchair, how to market yourself so that you look great on a resume and get the job that you want. Just different workshops that will help give wheelchair users the confidence to be themselves.
It's so needed what you're doing with Women's World on Wheels. And I can't wait to see where you go from here, because we need these resources. We need community, like you shared, even in your own journey. It's like you kind of get out and your life has completely changed. And where do you go from here? And just having people that you can reach out to and ask, or people that will help connect you with resources. That's what I love so much about the WAGs of SCI. And of course, their perspective is different because it's wives and girlfriends of someone with a spinal cord injury, but we need these different perspectives. And then also, how can we all build bridges and like work together on things, you know, One Girl Revolution and what you're doing with Women's World on Wheels. We need to find ways to focus on our commonality. and support each other, even in our differences too. Watch One Girl Revolution's Emmy-nominated short documentary, The Girl Inside, on our YouTube channel or at onegirlrevolution.com. The Girl Inside features a poignant look at the stories of incarcerated women within Cook County Jail and a life-changing academic course taught by Dr. Laura Biaggi called Storytelling as a Healing Art. This short documentary reunites Dr. Biaggi with 5 of her former students for a special one-day course on the transformative power of our stories and our voices. And what is revealed is the girl inside. Watch the Emmy-nominated short documentary, The Girl Inside, today on YouTube or at onegirlrevolution.com.
Yeah, I think it's super important. And like I said in the beginning, we don't know what we don't know. So I think as a newly injured woman, or it's really helpful to get together with some like women who have been in the game for years, or other women who were born with spinal bifida or other disabilities that cause them to use a wheelchair. It's so much better finding out information from other people who have the experience, as opposed to just someone telling you what you should do, or doctors saying this works, until you try it out, until you get firsthand experience. It's just information, so I'm really excited. I think it'll be really great. To build that community, build it into a bigger, stronger community. And
what do you hope people can learn from your story?
I think I've said this to you. I don't see myself as remarkable. I just see myself as, living life. And I think I only do that because I haven't limited myself. And I think that's what, don't put limits on what you can do. And don't put limits on other people based on what you think they can do or what you think they can't do. I think that's most important. I don't want to be told can't, So I think that's what people should take from it. Can't shouldn't be in your vocabulary.
What advice would you give to someone maybe who had a similar injury to you, and a woman who's out there who's had a similar injury to you and is now in a wheelchair? And on the flip side, what would you say to people like me who have, friends in a wheelchair, or see someone on the street? I'm going into a restaurant and I see someone in a wheelchair. What would you say to those two demographics of people?
So other women in wheelchair, I just say, live your life. Look for resources. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask. Like, I look back, the things I thought were silly and the things I talk to my girlfriends about now, they're not silly. Everyone's thinking, everyone wants to know the same things. And people that I come across just treat women in wheelchairs like women. The wheelchair should always be secondary to the person. And I think with anything in life, look at the person first. The best relationships come from people just coming up and talking to me as a person. Oh, you're an athlete. Oh, I saw you in the gym. This, that, the other thing. But not even letting me bring up the wheelchair. I think with people in wheelchairs, our disability is so seen. I think a lot of people have disabilities that you can't see. A lot of people have traumas that you don't know about. But I think because you can see our disability, I don't think that sometimes gives people the thought that they're allowed to ask or that they're allowed to bring it up. But I just think you should approach the person as a person. It's just kinder. Let them bring up, if I want to bring up my wheelchair in conversation, okay, but I just want to be seen as a person.
I think that's all of us, right? In this world where people put us in boxes, and we oftentimes put our own selves in boxes, like I can't do this, or I'm not good enough, or this, that, or the other thing. We need to focus more on having conversations and getting to know the person who's sitting right in front of us, or who we see on the street, just getting to know people and having those conversations. Because like you said, we don't know what's going on a lot of times in people's lives or in their own stories, and we can make judgments and assumptions about it, but really getting to know the person is so important. And focus on our commonality, which is what this podcast is all about, focusing on our stories and our commonality and raising one another up. Laura, where do you go from here? I mean, I know we don't have a crystal ball and we don't know exactly where you'll be 5 or 10 years down the line. You have a lot of great things going on with basketball and with Women's World on Wheels. Where do you hope in your big dream of dream worlds, where do you hope that you go from here in 5 or 10 years down the line?
You stumped me with this question.
That's okay. We don't have to talk about it.
I'm like, where do I go from here?
But I think you're doing it. Like, I think what you said, like that you want to make the wheelchair user a commonplace in our world. And I think that you sharing your story, which is why I wanted to have you on this podcast, just to talk about your heart and your life. And you're so resilient. And like I said, your story is such an inspiration, just your everyday journey, what you're doing to elevate people that are so often forgotten, right? And like, I really care about what I quote unquote call as forgotten about populations. And that could be a lot of different things. You know, it could be Indigenous women and the murdered and missing Indigenous women. It could be people that are in our plain sight, that are in our world, but we don't often think about because we don't see them on a daily basis. And so here you're doing that with wheelchair users, and you sharing your own story and how your life changed is going to do that. It's going to elevate other people and help them to be in their power, right? Like where it's like, I was created for a purpose. I'm as unique as my fingerprint. And if we believed that, you know, you, Laura, are leaving such a unique fingerprint on this world, and you're going to elevate other people to do the same thing.
Yeah, I just want to do stuff. See myself, and I'm hoping with Women's World on Wheels, that we can create a greater community of women wheelchair users, and it's largely based in Colorado right now. That's where a lot of the girls are, because Craig Hospital is there, the leading spinal cord injury hospital, and there's just a lot of resources. Colorado is a very accessible place. If we can get Michigan, if we can get that to be just as accessible, build just the community out here. And like how WAGs, they brought all the resources throughout the states and throughout Canada. If we can just build that greater community of women, I think it will help people as when they do get injured, or, you know, when they need that support from a community. I think it'll help them be well quicker. Just knowing where to go, I think, is a big aspect of it.
Laura, you have such a spark. And like I said, this resilience, this passion, this determination. What do you think that spark is? What is the thing that keeps you going every single day, or kept you going in those really difficult days when you were in the hospital and not knowing what your life was going to look like? What is that spark?
I'm just stubborn, honestly. Since I was very little, I've wanted to be independent. I think to a fault at some point, I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to be a bother. And I think that leads to me being more independent, trying to be better at people helping me, you know, if I need it, and not taking everything on. But just the stubbornness, and to know that, I don't know, I'll figure it out.
Well, you're figuring it out, and you are such a great example to the rest of us to just be stubborn and we can accomplish so many great things. And I can't wait to see where you go from here and follow you on social media. How can people support you in, elevating what you're doing, whether it's going to a game, if they want to go to Grand Rapids and go to the game, or follow Women's World on Wheels and share their social media? What are ways that they can get involved in all the different things that you're doing and support you?
Yeah, well, first of all, Women's Wheelchair Nationals is in Alabama next weekend. More than welcome to come out and support that. I think wheelchair sports is so under advertised and undersold, but it's a great community, and I think wheelchair basketball, it's sometimes a lot rougher than even able-bodied basketball, just hitting chairs. And I think it's a fun, exciting sport to watch. And I love to get more awareness on those sports. But also with Women's World on Wheels, we're really looking for support, both financially or volunteering if you're in the area. You can go to womenswow.org, WOMENS see what we're doing there, stay up to date. There's links to all our social medias. You can share your story if you're a woman in a wheelchair or have experience. You can share your story so that we can show other women what you're doing, what they can do. So I think that's the biggest way right now. Follow us on social media and just bring awareness to the cause.
I always say, Laura, that the free way to support anything that you hear about on this podcast is to just follow on social media and share something that resonates with you, or, share anything on the pages just to spread awareness. But I will be sure to put your website and all the different social media links so people can easily get in touch with you and what you're doing and follow and support and volunteer. You're a one girl revolution to me, and I know to so many others. You are changing the world every single day through your life. Who's a one girl revolution in your life? Who's a woman or girl that's inspired you?
One girl revolution in my life has always been my twin sister, Sarah. I think I've always looked up to her as an inspiration, a beacon of resiliency, of sticking to her guns, of really being herself. She is a teacher in Virginia right now, Manassas Park Elementary, and she just won Teacher of the Year for her school district. I think just the passion she puts into that, the way she inspires her students to be better, to do better, and she inspires me to do better and be better. She's always pushing me, or I'll call her whenever for advice, just to talk at, just to bounce ideas back and forth. And so she's always been my biggest inspiration.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So last question that I always end this podcast on, and I'd like to ask you, if you could leave women and girls around the world with one message, what would it be?
There's no limits. Just don't limit yourself. There's always a way. If God wants you to do it, you can do it. So.
Well, you are showing us how to do that every single day. Laura, thank you so much for being on the One Girl Revolution podcast. And thank you for all the incredible work that you do.
Oh, of course. Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. That's the number one girl REVO. And you can find more information on One Girl Revolution at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number one girlrevolution.com.